Good afternoon, everyone. We're back in council to resume our council meeting. That was recessed for lunch and in camera break. And just to pick up on the agenda, we made it through our report references in today's agenda. And we are now moving on to consider the report that was held for questions of staff. And that was administrative report number 2. And Councillor Carr, you had requested to have that brought back. That is the 2017 to 21 budget outlook. And we do have staff here who actually have a PowerPoint if a present council wishes to see a PowerPoint presentation, or if you just have some brief questions, we can do that. Patrice Impey's here, and as well as Ben Russell, our Director of Financial Planning and Analysis. Did you want the presentation, or would you just want to ask questions?
I leave it to the will of council around the presentation. I do have some questions, but I'm happy either way, and I leave it to council's wishes.
Okay. I mean, I think council, you were the one that wanted to hold this for questions.
I have questions.
So why don't you go ahead with questions then?
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for providing the report and being here for answering questions. My first question has to do with page 2 of the report, which has been distributed to the public, that the City of Vancouver has the lowest tax increase in general in the past and in all of Metro Vancouver, with the exception of White Rock. And I want to know why. Like, what's the reasoning that puts us as basically an outlier amongst the other growing municipalities?
Through the chair, Councillor, so I can't speak for all the other municipalities as far as their financial planning, but as you know, we go through a pretty rigorous process of looking at all of our revenue sources and all of our expense pressures. And in fact, the outlook is really the kickoff of that process for this year. We do look at our financial goals, include keeping our property tax increases at a reasonable rate, and we use the targeted inflation for that. And target inflation has been 2% over the last few years, and we have been able to balance our budget at that level. Of course, actual inflation has been lower than that. So that is part of our financial planning, and obviously if we can't get everything done that we need to, we would bring forward a recommended tax rate that we felt was appropriate.
This is the dilemma I face when looking at the budget forecast and sort of the economic outlook, which is that we are aiming to be, and we are, the fastest growing urban municipality, large city municipality in Canada. We have record housing starts. That means more people. It means more business. It means more activity, and that to me means more demand for services. And I just am unsure how we can expand services, knowing we are expanding our population and our economy, and do it just by an inflationary increase.
So maybe one of the other elements on the revenue side is we do have other revenue sources other than property tax increases. So we have new construction. So as new buildings become occupied, they are taxed. And so that's additional revenue to the city in addition to the property tax increase. So that's in the past range between $5 and $10 million of new construction. So that might be more than most of our neighboring municipalities would have. We also have revenue for building permits and a number of other, parking. Obviously, we have a lot more parking than many of other similar of our neighboring municipalities. So it's part of those other revenue sources, which is about 25% of our revenue is from other revenue sources. So it is a different mix than our neighboring municipalities, but as we noted in the outlook, it is always a challenge. We're a growing city, and there are certainly a lot of pressures, and we know that our collective agreements haven't been settled, so there's a lot of unknowns as well. So that's part of what we need to do over the next month or so.
Understood. I just think that we need to really monitor the situation.
I think the other one I just wanted to mention is also we do our consultation, and in that consultation we do ask the public about what their tax tolerance level is. And in the past years, about half of the respondents have said 2% they would be comfortable. Now, so we'll do that again. We're in the consultation process right now, and we'll see if that comes back differently as well.
For one, we'll be promoting people to think bigger. Regarding the economic analysis you provide, the provincial, national, and global context, I know that it's very much traditional economic analysis. So it's all sort of the growth projections and economic projections based on the kind of current economy. Can we not work in, and should we not be working in, some thought as to how the global economy, the national and provincial economies may well change if we take on, as we say we are, federal government made a move yesterday on this in terms of carbon tax, meeting the reduction of emissions that we have promised to do in the Paris Agreement. That shifts the way the economy operates when you really think about that. I know it's in line with our own thinking, so I'm wondering when we will start to see in our outlook documents that assessment of how major shifts coming down the pipe will affect us.
Yeah, and I think certainly as we go into the budget process around our capital planning and some of those investments in our capital is a very good place for us to incorporate that, but that's a very good point.
Okay.
And we'll look at incorporating that going forward.
Okay, one final question, and that is on user fees. I did notice, and I did read the results of the survey we did. So citizens were not happy yet to have more than a 2% increase in taxes, but they were happy to look at increasing user fees even for fees that they, for services they use.
Yes.
So, and there were two-part questions, two questions we asked on that, but one was they're happy to see fees on services they use that have no fees already. What are those services that don't have fees already, that have an opportunity for fees?
And that's some of the work that we're doing through our planning, working with other municipalities to understand the types of fees. We're going through all of our permitting fees through development permits, engineering. We'll go through our community service fees. And as we're looking at that, we're comparing to other municipalities on what type of fees they charge. So when we brought through last year to council some of the permitting fees, we did add some new ones in.
Yes.
So we'll do that as we go through that exercise. So so we know that there are fees that other municipalities do include.
So I can look forward to that coming back to another council meeting.
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Garber. We don't need a motion. We're receiving that report for information. So thank you to staff for putting that budget update together for council. Appreciate you being here today and answering the questions as well. And we are done with that report and other reports that were approved in the consent agenda earlier. So we're on to bylaws. We have 13 bylaws on the agenda for consideration by council, and I'll ask if any member wishes to hold any of the bylaws for debate, separate vote, or because of conflict of interest. Councillor DeGenova?
Yes. Sorry, I have a list as they're noted on the agenda here, and we're all from a single item. I have
Maybe I'll go through.
bylaws 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Thank you. From the public hearing held on September 20th.
7, 8, 9, 10, yes.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you about those. Okay, thank you. And yes, you declared a conflict of interest in relation to this matter at public hearing, so you will not be voting on 5 and 7 through 10?
Yes.
Okay, and also on those bylaws, Councillor Louie, you were absent from that hearing. Have you reviewed the proceedings and will you be voting on the bylaws?
I have not and will not.
Okay, I'll just skip back to bylaw 2, and bylaw 2 is a public hearing enactment bylaw from a hearing that was held May 26, 2015. Councillors Affleck and Stevenson were absent from that hearing. Councillor Affleck, have you reviewed the proceedings and will you be voting on bylaw 2?
I don't have.
Okay, that's a no. And Councillor Stevenson?
Yes, I have, and I will.
Yes, on that one. Okay, and bylaw 6 is a public hearing enactment bylaw from the hearing held on December the 15th, 2015. And Councillors Louie and Jang were absent from this hearing. Councillor Louie, have you reviewed the proceedings? Will you be voting on bylaw 6?
I have not and will not be.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Jang?
Yes, I have, and I will be voting.
Okay. Councillor DeGenova?
Bylaw number 2, Mr. Mayor, it's noted in the agenda that I was not on council at the time, and I will not be voting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'll need someone to move adoption of bylaws 1 to 13. Councillor Deal, Councillor Stevenson will second. And all those in favor, noting that you are not voting on those specifics. Yeah, on 2, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's moved and seconded, and all those in favor, for those which you're eligible to vote for. Any opposed? And that carries. So the list of the approved bylaws can be viewed on the city's website. We have 5 administrative motions which are to be moved by Councillor Jang, seconded by Councillor Meggs for motions A2 to A5. Councillor DiGenova, you previously declared conflict of interest in relation to this matter at the public hearing on September the 20th, 2016, and therefore you will not be voting on those motions, correct? Okay. And so that's moved and seconded. And all in favor, administrative motions, any opposed? And those carry unanimously. So we're on to motions on notice. And the first is a request for provincial review of the homeowner grant program, which is to be moved by Councillor Louis, seconded by Councillor Meggs. Councillor Louis, would you like to introduce your motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion is quite detailed, so I won't go into too much detail on the reasons on why, but be it resolved that we should be asking for a review of the homeowner grant, specifically for Vancouver, but more generally for the entire province as well. The effects has been that as a result of significantly rising assessments in the city of Vancouver and Metro Vancouver, that many homeowners that who have taken no action other than to continue to live in our city have lost a significant grant, $570 in some cases. And if you are a person with disability or a veteran or older person above 65, you've lost a further $275 worth of grant, totaling $845. My thinking is that given the fact that historically the province has covered approximately 95% of the homeowners in the province with this grant, and that until very recently it was maintained at 95 or 95.5% up until 2013, where it changed in 2014 to 93.8 and then dropped to 93, 2016 dropping to 91%, and expected to drop further, that the province is giving out significantly less grants through this program. And who bears the brunt of this are homeowners, in fact, are renters as well, because it's not just the homeowners. The homeowners, of course, if they're renting out their places, have additional costs, and likely will try to download some of these costs to their renters. So it affects both homeowners and renters as well. This grant amount hasn't been reviewed and increased since 2006. This amount has been static since that period of time. Most significantly for the city of Vancouver specifically is that in 2005, although the provincial average was 95%, 84% was covered in Vancouver. But today, the number is down to 64%, 64.7. That's a full 20% drop of homeowners in a city that are receiving that are receiving this grant, and that equates to about $30 million if the difference between the 91% and the 64% was closed by the province. This is $30 million that could be held within the pockets of Vancouver residents, and my thinking is that given that we do pay, I think, an above average amount of taxes to the various other authorities that use BC assessment as the model, whether it be schools, TransLink, BC assessments, BC MFA. Vancouver, because of its higher assessments, already pays a higher amount, and yet on this side of the equation, we're receiving less in terms of grants itself, and thereby giving reason and rise to this motion that I put forward. I hope to have the support of council. Obviously, this is something I think of great import to many of our people in our city, and anything we can do to improve the affordability of our city should be done. And this is particularly challenging in face of a provincial budget that has run a surplus, that they continue to hold and reduce the amount of homeowner grant that's made available thereby making Vancouver even less affordable. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Louis. And we'll open this now up for debate. Councillor Ball.
Yes, I actually would like to thank Councillor Louis for bringing forward this very important motion. In talking to a number of our seniors, people seem to say to them, that amount of money can't be too much because your house is worth so much. But we have to remember a lot of people are now house rich and do not have the salaries or the incomes to be able to match the house they're in, but we don't want them having to leave their house because that creates yet another problem. So this is a tremendously important motion, and I hope it will be very helpful to the seniors in our community. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ball. Councillor DiGenova to the motion.
I also have consistently supported measures here at the City Council that encouraged affordability. So I too will support this motion. However, I would encourage Councillor Louis, who has put forward this motion, to reach out to the province. I know that Councillor Carr and I shared the City of Vancouver's meeting with Minister Coleman at UBCM, and we watched entire council from the City of Coquitlam walk out before us. So I do hope that Councillor Louis has contacted Minister Coleman, as he is the minister responsible for housing, and I can't say that I'm not pleased that you weren't at the meeting or Vision Vancouver wasn't, because it afforded me an extra 2.5 minutes. Councillor Carr and I split our 15 minutes, but I think it's important to encourage the province in several ways. And a motion is one thing, but certainly meetings, as our mayor had with the provincial government earlier in the year. We have seen movement, and we've seen ourselves be able to work with the province, and I know that working on housing is something that they are very dedicated to as well. So I would like to say, if we truly are working towards affordability, let's try working with our provincial partners in ways other than just a motion. So thank you very much. I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Louis, and Councillor Meggs for bringing forward this motion. I do want to put my support forward in the context of a discussion that happened at the recent UBCM meetings in Victoria, and that was a workshop that occurred, or a plenary. It wasn't a plenary. It was a smaller group meeting around housing and affordability, and statements were made that really what we should be doing is taxing land higher and reducing income taxes, because what you want to do is put more money in the pockets of people who are earning money, et cetera, and increasing the kind of support for people who aren't working through whatever kind of provincial support systems there are. But taxing land, because it is the economically proper place to achieve getting revenues, and for a city it would make a lot more sense in terms of increased tax base. However, we have no control over income and alleviating the tax burden on people who work, or increasing the incomes for people who aren't working but do receive assistance from governments. And in the absence of that ability, and in the absence, despite our many requests to senior governments to increase the incomes, especially for those who are in more desperate need, the absence of a positive response to date, other than a very small increase, which is still great, I'm grateful for, to the minimum wage. In the absence of those, I don't think that we should be increasing the tax as was suggested at the UBCM on the land base. I think that people are hurting in this city. The increased value of their homes is not of their own volition. It's happened to them because of market conditions that have been largely out of control, and certainly not under our control. So in the absence of those things, I will support this motion, because it does alleviate the pain that many people are going through in terms of, especially seniors living in their homes, in terms of the increased price they pay when they can't get a homeowner grant.
Thank you. And no further speakers. We'll go back to Councillor Louis for closing comments.
Mr. Mayor, just before I close, I had intended to introduce it as part of the original motion, but I have a slight amendment to add a few words. Be it further resolved that a copy of this motion be forwarded to Vancouver MLAs for their information and action. like it's in the vein as described earlier in some of the speakers, and I think important for the MLAs to understand the context that we're putting this forward to them for. I do need to say that UBCM is not the only forum that we get the opportunity to meet with elected officials at the provincial level. In fact, I take the opportunity often. Councillor Meggs and I are meeting with Minister Fassbender tomorrow. And we often take those opportunities outside of the construct of a provincial municipal elected body because we can and we should have these types of conversations as often. I can assure Councillor DiGenova that I often meet with many ministers from the provincial level and at the federal level outside of those meetings, and I would encourage you, if you are so inclined, to do so as well. But certainly, before doing so, we should also be sure of what positions that we're representing. In this case, I wanted to have the weight of council behind this motion to ensure that council was solidly behind this ask. And then subsequent to this, I expect that I will have many conversations with our provincial counterparts to ensure that they fully understand how impactful their decisions to reduce the grants given to Vancouver residents has been, and if they're truly in favor of reducing the cost of living and creating affordability in our city, this is a very concrete way on doing that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Louis. So we will go to the vote on the motion with that slight friendly amendment that Councillor Louis. Everyone clear on what we're voting for? Councillor DiGenova.
It's just a procedural point of order. I was curious, perhaps a point of clarification regarding if we have to vote on the amendment as it wasn't distributed as a part of the package, or if we...
Councillor Louis just put it on table.
Okay.
I just wanted... Comments?
It was introduced after he tabled his motion, so I was just curious.
Correct. And I didn't hear anyone express any concern, so we treat it as if the whole council is amenable, it's a friendly amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Did you wish to have it for separate vote, or okay?
No. Just curious.
So we are voting. Here we go again. Okay, we have 11 votes in favor, unanimous support for the motion. That carries, and thanks to Councillor Louis and Councillor Meggs for bringing that forward, and we'll look to next steps in terms of making sure the Vancouver MLAs see that as soon as possible. So we're on to our second motion on notice, and that is a request for leaves of absence for Councillors Reimer and Stevenson. Would someone like to move that motion? So moved. Councillor Louis, Councillor Jang will second. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries unanimously as well. So we're on to notice of motion, new business, inquiries, and other matters. And I've got Councillor Louis, are you still on? Was that a leftover?
I could go on.
I'll go, I think that was from the motion. So we'll go to Councillor DiGenova first up.
Oh. No, Mr. Mayor, I'm just organizing some things. So I'll put myself.
Okay. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have forwarded to the clerk a notice of motion, so I'd like to give notice of motion, and for the meeting of 2 weeks from now. Notice. That good? Thank you. I did want to also speak to two other issues. One sad and one happy. I really wanted to express my very deep condolences around the loss of Bing Tom. Thank you for doing that at the beginning of our meeting, Mr. Mayor, but I really just wanted to express my own feeling of loss around Mr. Tom as an individual, and particularly ask us to remember the last time he came before council, which was in the Grandview Woodland Plan, and how inspiring he was to listen to at that time, and particularly I think his sense of vision for the city and his sense of bold creativity that will be sorely missed. The happy news is really the attendance last night of the Mayor's Arts and Book Awards, and thank you for sponsoring those awards. I think to our staff too, and all the volunteers who came out, and to all the winners. It's an incredibly inspiring night, and so just thanks to all who made that evening possible, and congratulations to all the winners and to all the nominees for the Emerging Artists Awards that came forward. It's a lovely addition to that night.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carr, for recognizing everyone involved in the Mayor's Arts Awards. Again, a big success this year. And actually, if I could just ask the clerks to pop up that motion that was just on notice. I know a few of us were looking at it, but might not have caught it. And I'll go to Councillor Meggs next up.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I endorse the comments about the Arts Awards, and I think staff should be commended for organizing it impeccably, too. It always goes off very flawlessly. I've sent the clerk a motion on those for our next meeting as well. This simply follows up on a unanimous decision of council last year to suspend the issuance of taxi licenses while the province, we hoped, would engage in a process of discussion and consultation around policy, and that consultation continues, probably at least until the end of the election period. So this proposition, which council can debate next time, is that we continue with our status quo arrangement.
Okay, another motion on notice, and thank you for that, Councillor Meggs. We'll see both of those at our next council meeting. And Councillor Louis is next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just an update from FCM. The Board of Directors met on September 13th through 16th in Oakville. Councillor Stevenson and I were in attendance. Primarily, the meeting centered around Phase 2 funding of the federal government's ambitious infrastructure plan, and the priorities that we as an entity and as local government would want to have an emphasis on, specifically on transit, on green investment, ensuring that there's significant and dedicated funding towards housing and rural infrastructure, maintaining the call that federal government should be proceeding with a 50% contribution to project costs, and most importantly, that provinces across our country maintain their traditional 1/3 share of their costs rather than having them reduce their share with the increase of the federal share. Had a very good meeting with Minister Jean-Yves Duclos, the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, who heard, I think, and received well our message in regards to housing and the National Housing Strategy. We expressed significant urgency on moving forward with both that strategy, but more importantly, that a significant amount of carve-out of money was necessary from the government to ensure that the plan was properly funded. I know that Mr. Mayor, yourself and the Big City Mayor's Caucus have also put out a very strong position in regards to housing, and this is of course well received by all the membership of the FCM. We met with Dwight Dory, the National Chief of the Indigenous People Assembly of Canada, and it was an important step towards our joint efforts to work together to support urban Indigenous people living across our country, and we continue to want to foster that a framework of reconciliation with our First Nations people across our entire nation. That's my update from the FCM. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Louis. Much appreciated. And Councillor DiGenova is next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I also wanted to briefly, I know that you had already expressed condolences from yourself and from council, and I'd like to echo Councillor Carr in expressing my deepest condolences regarding the passing of Bing Tom, and extend my condolences to his friends and family. He certainly has left a legacy here in the city of Vancouver that won't be forgotten among his other numerous contributions, both inside and outside of architecture. So I just wanted to note that. Also, on I suppose a more positive, happier note, although that was sad, as Councillor Carr said, starting off with the sad business, but very important. I also attended the UBCM conference, as I had mentioned before, and had some excellent meetings. I think it's a great opportunity to connect with other municipal leaders, staff, and many of our peers who we can learn from. And I was able to have a meeting that I shared with Councillor Carr with the Minister of Housing. And I understand that they've made several investments in the City of Vancouver and continue to do that. And I also spoke with them regarding affordable home ownership, which was a motion that I brought forward. The Council passed unanimously last year, and our Chief Housing Officer had made recommendations on that, so hoping that we will be able to move forward with that. And I would encourage all of my fellow councillors to, if you're meeting with Minister Coleman, to remind him of that. I understand that affordability is very difficult in our city, but I was pleased that he had the time to meet with the City of Vancouver, although he had a very busy schedule at UBCM. Many other notable sessions from UBCM. However, I'm coming to a limit on my time here. I also wanted to mention that I also was here with our staff to welcome 4 mayors who came in from Iceland just last week, and I understand that our staff took them on a tour of Marine Gateway, also down the Cambie Corridor, and they were here to learn about our Canada Line and our transportation. So I just wanted to let Council know that they were enjoying our beautiful city. That's what they had conveyed to us, and to thank staff for their hospitality as well. I also just recently attended on behalf of the city and brought greetings at German National Day yesterday, which was a fantastic celebration that celebrates not only the culture and diversity, but really was a way to look at how a community in the city of Vancouver reaches out to people, both who may have been German nationals or have immigrated here as well. And theme of that certainly was Germany and what Germany had done for the Syrian refugee crisis. I know that the provincial government and the official opposition at the province were represented there, and I also spoke on behalf of the city. Also, the Confraternanza through the Italian Cultural Center just celebrated its 50th anniversary, and I also attended their banquet on the weekend where they honored Mr. Gallardi as Italian Canadian of the Year. So just wanted to note those events as well as, although it was a few weeks back, it was after our last council meeting, the Jewish Federation had their annual event at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre where they had a number of speakers in, a real focus on tech this year, but they do fantastic work as well in the community. So just wanted to recognize all of those events that I had attended, and there's numerous events, but I see others on the list, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor DeGenova. Councillor Ball.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this past weekend, we celebrated Seniors Day, International Seniors Day, International Day of Elder Persons, and Councillor Louis and myself attended the flag raising here at the city, and he read the proclamation. And we had proclamations in Jim Diva Plaza, the beautiful Jim Diva Plaza, where there was also a barbecue held for all the senior citizens in the West End, which was extremely popular in spite of the chilly day. And also Brock House had a wonderful weekend of celebration. So it was a great time to be able to bring focus into the needs of the seniors and also all the contributions that they have made and continue to make to our city. We indeed have a very lively and involved senior citizens committee, and I wanted to let you know that several years ago I brought forward a motion for safer streets for seniors, and our engineering staff made a real effort to clean up some of the bottlenecks. And unfortunately, we're seeing a few of those come back that are making it very difficult for seniors to walk on the streets and those with or those who are disabled. So I'm hoping that staff will look at the motion again and have a chance to have a fresh look at what is going on our streets and where it is extremely difficult for seniors. So with that, I will leave it, and a great celebration and congratulations to our seniors. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ball. Councillor Reimer.
Thanks, Mayor Robertson. I did have a couple things to share with Council. One or quite a few things related to UBCM, and then also had an inquiry for staff around the school board capacity issue. So UBCM, I was able to meet with Ministers Fassbender, Pollock, Bernier, Parliamentary Secretary Sturdy, opposition member, well, I guess not opposition member, but leader of the Green Party, Andrew Weaver, as well as opposition MLAs George Heyman and Gary Holman, in relation to climate, energy, and renewables issues on your behalf as someone who's been pushing that agenda forward. I also was able to attend and speak on behalf of the city at press conferences related to one current motion we had, the poverty reduction plan for BC. Was really pleased to see we passed, UBCM has passed a motion on that policy every year since 2009. We are now up to 24 municipalities that were at the press conference, and I think the media were definitely getting the news that this is not a downtown Vancouver issue. It is a Terrace issue, an Atlan issue, a Cranbrook issue, a small town, big city, suburban, rural, urban, that there is critical housing failure across the province, and that's leading to critical failure for families and working people all over the place. So it gave me, despite the lack of provincial action, some hope that that movement is possible. There's also a press conference of mayors and myself on behalf of Mayor Robertson around the process issues related to Kinder Morgan. And again, every year that list grows substantially. So heartening to see, although of course we await the decision. I also received on the city's behalf the 2016 Climate and Energy Action Award. We received an honorable mention for public sector collaboration. We lost out to the first prize winner was a group, Kimberly, that had 18 different agreements that they had signed between 8 organizations. I'm not even sure if the math of how that's possible, but that's what you needed to do to enable BC's first community scale public sector partnership around a solar project. So it's just a little heads up for us. Ours was because of a partnership, and how lovely that it came out last week, a partnership that we've had with Fortis for quite a long time to reduce energy consumption, one that they've been very supportive of, along with BC Hydro and the cities of Richmond and Coquitlam. It's the Empower Me program, which you may remember from the presentation they did at Council. And finally, you may have noticed in the resolutions booklet, our motion on kids aging out of care had been replaced by what I felt was certainly a less comprehensive one, and ours had been ruled redundant. In working with the mover of the one that was to be considered Maple Ridge and New West, which had subsequently passed the motion we had passed, we were able to use process effectively to get ours bumped all the way back up onto the floor and move with the support of all 3 municipalities at the microphone, and then by the assembly at UBCM. So that was really heartening to see. On the other issues that I mentioned, school board, I did want to let folks know, you probably do know that about 48 hours after we passed the motion asking the minister to change the capacity requirements for school boards, he announced that he was changing the capacity requirement, or not so much changing as not taking them into consideration as a key factor in capital allocations. So that was very heartening to see, and as noted, I was able to meet with him in Victoria, so I did I was primarily talking to him about energy and climate, but we were able to have a discussion around school board. He was a mayor back when I was on school board, so we had a chat around that. And also for staff, my question was that school board had passed a motion looking to the city for some information on how we calculate, how we take plans, community plans, and then provide information about our projections for children and youth in those communities and families. School board has subsequently decided to suspend the school closures, so it's not as relevant for their process, but I felt that in that discussion, it would be very helpful for us as council to get a better understanding of how those projections are made, not just for schools, actually, school-age children, but I'd be interested for seniors and other demographics so that we have a better understanding of how that works moving forward over the 30-year life of a development plan. And I'm not expecting an answer right now, but I think a memo or something written down would be really, it would assist me for sure.
Okay, that's all I have on the queue for notices of motion, inquiries, and new business. And that means we are done with our agenda. Councillor Louis will move adjournment. Councillor Jang seconds. Any debate? All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. This council meeting is adjourned. And we're back here tomorrow morning at 9:30 for our committee meeting on policies and strategic priorities. Have a great day.